Today, we're going to dive deep into the mystery of the divine feminine spirit and not what you think. Yeah, so the title Revival, as we see here in a few moments, is deeply linked to spiritual concepts, esoteric concepts that, well, we've heard everywhere, here and there. Most of us come from a New Age background. But it is time for us to systematically investigate these topics, to investigate what purification means, what illumination means. And don't be surprised if you are finding some of this information quite revealing. A little bit of background here to what it is actually that I am proposing. Spiritual science is the systematic study of the unseen spiritual dimensions of reality. So we all know that there was a physical reality, and underneath all of it, a spiritual reality that if one, well, trains, refines, and purifies one's spiritual senses and organs, become visible to a spiritual seeker. So I think this is kind of like where we all have our common ground, no matter what spiritual traditions or teachings we are coming from or we have been introduced to. We all are seekers, and we want to use our inner perception, our conscious experience, and our higher cognition to understand the laws and the beings that shape the material and the soul worlds. And for that, we need a little bit of guidance. I use the anthroposophical system, represented by Rudolf Steiner, who is also probably the most prominent teacher for spiritual science, especially in our most recent and Western spiritual traditions. So we came here through the first two episodes, and with Revival, we're actually going to go a little deeper. So I'm only going to be able really to introduce you to these vast concepts of purification and illumination. And we will also sort of take a little look at what the Holy Communion, which many of you know from church, actually means. But we will only really be able to scratch the surface, because this is a conversation that can take weeks and months. We will explore the deep spiritual current of revival. We could also replace the word revival with resurrection, remembering, reawakening. So you guys are all very, very familiar with these terms. Yeah, the reawakening of the divine feminine spirit within and the human soul. And these concepts that go along with that theme, which are purification and communion. Yeah, so how does spiritual science actually help us? Why am I, after all these years of energy healing, energy talk, true self-talk, finally get to the place where I'm talking about spiritual science or spirituality as a science? So most of you know that I actually have a physical science degree, a background in chemistry. So I didn't just come here through guesswork. I was raised and trained to think in ways that are very systematic. And the funny thing is, like with so many before me, that the more we investigate natural science and dive into, the mechanics and the descriptions of, how nature works and, how the molecules and atoms and how all this comes about, the more questions are actually raised within us, at least in me, namely, why? Yeah, how did this all come into existence? And this is the reason why I naturally gravitate towards spiritual science, because it allows us to fathom sort of the knowledge that has been taught over 10,000 years and all these different spiritual traditions, yeah, and unites with science. I think this is sort of the big stepping stone for all of us now in this time of artificial intelligence and information being so readily available to all of us, that we have to start discerning information a little bit more. And for that, we need a little bit of a framework. So I'm suggesting the framework of spiritual science because it helps us to develop our own inner perception of the unseen world, yeah, without any fancy tools or plant medicines or anything. Those are all valid sort of initiation ways as well, but they all have sort of a different nature and different dangers. And spiritual science is probably the most sort of safe spiritual initiation path that I can recommend to you, as it cultivates our inner organs and our spiritual knowing. Yeah, and that means really that we learn how to master our own thinking, our own feeling, and our own willing. This is something that when I say it, it sounds so easy, but I think you guys are all very familiar with how difficult this can be. And last but not least, spiritual science encourages freedom, responsibility, and reverence for truth, and all of that from within, from a perspective of internalization and not from the perspective of externalization, where we make ourselves dependent on outer things to come in. It's really the pathway of discovering, what is in you, and then by gradually applying it, learning that you can actually be part of this spiritual journey without any particular, I would say qualification. Yeah, you would need to have a will, a desire, maybe even a hunger or thirst for wanting to know what's beyond the boundaries of this physical world. Yeah, this includes, aspects of the afterlife, aspects of, the mysteries and the myths that we as humans grow up with. Yeah, that we can all tap into from within ourselves. Yeah, so I want to give the word to you guys here for a moment, just to break the ice a little bit before we go into the concept of purification and illumination. I would love to hear from you what the spiritual traditions or teachings that you have come across on your own journey, what those are. Are they mostly from Eastern traditions, like maybe Vedic traditions, or Taoist traditions, or perhaps more recent Jewish traditions, or Muslim traditions, or maybe even pagan traditions or Egyptian traditions? What are the things that you have come across your own personal journey that you felt attracted to, that you wanted to dive in deeper? Yeah, and how did you arrive here? Who would like to share?
I
And
try.
that would be Christian.
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
tried to explore some of the Eastern, but it never really ignited anything in me.
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah,
And like Christian, as in like Christian esotericism, or the Christian sort of essence, or church, any particular church?
yeah.
What
Just
is your background spiritually?
yeah, the Christian church, but I didn't go that much to church as a child. But the culture I grew up in is Christian.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's the values is from Christianity.
thank you. Thank you, Anita. Who else wants to share?
I can share. I so
Hey
I'm
there.
hello.
I didn't know you were here.
I'm here. Um, so my journey, I think, started uh, through kids and education. So I became a teacher, and I was really exploring different methods of teaching, and I came across Waldorf education and Rudolf Steiner. So I think for me, Rudolf Steiner, which is in its essence spiritual science, led me down the path. Obviously, mixed in with my childhood and very strong Christian and nature and life values. It was easy for me to see and easy for me to understand it, where it just all kind of clicked into place. And the interesting part about Rudolf Steiner is that he was so multifaceted and in so many different areas of life, where when you explore one area such as education, it then opens up to another area such as biodynamic farming, and then it opens up another area such as spiritual science in its essence. So for me, it was a way to just kind of explore different areas.
Very cool. Well, I'm glad you made it. Thank you for sharing. What are some of your guys' spiritual backgrounds? Maybe you have no spiritual background per se, but you arrived at a certain place of seeking knowledge or wanting to know more through other studies. Yeah, just like you were here shared with us. How does one get interested in the deeper works of spirituality?
Hi, Jona. This is Abigail.
Hi,
Um,
Abby.
yeah, so I too come from a Christian background.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in my younger years going to church, and that was the Church of England in England.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of like waned as I grew older. Um, but from an early adulthood, one of the things that I would do is I always kind of wanted to go to the self help books. Like if I went into a bookshop, I would always go to the self help section, and usually come away with at least like one or two books over, like every time I visited. And so I would say that I was certainly influenced by the New Age movement, but looking back, I think more it was that kind of self help, those kind of books that were coming out, a couple of decades ago. And so I had this kind of inner striving time, kind of to look at what was going on within myself, and how I was relating to my surroundings. So yeah, I would say there was kind of
Mm-hmm.
this seeking behavior.
Wanting to understand yourself, right?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very good reason, and often also very, very typical, I want to say, for this impulse in us to grow, wanting to understand ourselves, our own journey, and perhaps even wanting to improve, wanting to help, wanting to heal things within ourselves. Mm-hmm. Any other sort of impulses that you can identify now, maybe in hindsight, sort of what brought you, to this deeper spiritual journey?
Jona, hi.
Hi.
Um, Abigail said it perfectly. I remember really not feeling good enough at a young age and seeing a Louise Hay, her big book, the one with
Mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm,
colors. And look, at 13, 12, what do you really know? But I just know that that book stood out. And my mom being into homeopathy and yoga, I think that is where I think that's the feminine, actually, really. And then I am not Christian. I'm like, I'm still Jewish. And it's like, and I get confused between, I'm into the Christ consciousness, but there's still that honoring of my Jewish faith that I need to kind of just nurture, not kind of just take out. But yeah, I think those were the things, the core things, because there was just so much chaos in my little world. So I think those little things just stood out. And from there, meeting people and different people. And then, yeah, but and I love what the first person was speaking about Rudolf Steiner. I just wish I was there and could articulate it in that way. But I think it makes me feel like I still feel a part of things, even though I'm not Christian. But I've
This is a
loved
wonderful
Christian
point.
people. I know I do.
I love
I
Jewish
really,
people.
what?
I love Jewish people. So there is no
Oh,
difference. Listen,
thank you.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you bring this up. Okay, so just me reiterating here, but what I hear you say that there's perhaps you had exposure to different traditions, maybe a little bit confusion, but you also sort of intuitively or organically gravitated to it where there was belonging, or there was a welcoming feeling, or there was something that helped you to understand yourself better.
Bang
and
on. Bang
and
on.
this confliction that you mentioned between different spiritual traditions. I'm really going to try to clarify this, okay? Because there doesn't have to be a contradiction. All right, we're going to have to really understand spiritual traditions in a slightly different way, yeah, to get past this collective animosity. Yeah, we have a collectively programmed animosity between different spiritual traditions, unfortunately. And that's something that we get pulled into. If we can boil it down to the essence of actually what makes us a spiritual seeker, yeah, and what is it that we are longing for, yeah, that we're seeking, you'll find that that there is different methods, yeah, of getting there. There's different ways, different traditions, different ceremonies, different laws. And this is really the reason why spiritual science can be very helpful, because it bypasses all of that. Yeah, it's not really about, the specific tradition or a ceremonial context that you pick. It is about the understanding the meaning of them. And you, yeah, as the individuated soul, the the being, yeah, that embodies divinity, even if it is only as a higher potential. But you become sort of the center of it, and it happens through you. And by focusing on what happens through you, we can transcend these the stereotypical or often really programmed conflicts. Yeah. So I'm really happy that you brought this up, Sean, because this gives me an opportunity to dive into this aspect of spirituality as well. I think it's safe to say that most of us come from a place of, trying to understand, yeah, a place of confusion, maybe even also a place of desperation. John, you mentioned not feeling good enough, or not feeling like we fit in. So confusion, desperation, doubt, fear, and maybe also struggle, yeah, like an addiction or a health challenge or a tragedy or trauma in life, yeah, that can make us question why we're here. And so, no matter what these things are that we became sort of introduced to asking spiritual questions, yeah, to spiritual inquiry, let's just open ourselves up right now for, going into the meaning of things, from which on you can then, find your own spirituality. And I want to start out with a statement from Rudolf Steiner. You will find this statement, or the essence of the statement, in any spiritual tradition. He goes on to say here, only in the purified soul can the divine fire be kindled. Yeah, so basically saying there's something in our humanhood. We talked about what it means to be human and all the challenges that come with this. Only in the purified soul can the divine fire be kindled. Yeah, divine as just sort of the Godhead, the creator source, the higher power, which, we can also sort of streaming through ourselves. But the fire, the symbology of the fire and kindled, okay, meaning that we have to sort of provide the kindle, we have to provide a sacred space, a sacred vessel, if you will, that can find the portal ground, like we talked about in episode 2, within our heart. Yeah, and in most spiritual traditions, it's obvious that this occurs through the heart. It is not the physical heart, obvious. The sacred heart, that space that we are talking about, is the center of our center. It's within ourselves. Yeah, and Steiner in spiritual science helps us to understand this in a more detailed way. Yeah, so he goes deep into the fourfold human being, so not just seeing ourselves as this physical being, but also seeing ourselves as a being that has sort of an energetic quality to it, an etheric being, yeah, and also being that has sort of a soul desire, that has the sacred heart, an astral body. And then last but not least, sort of as the highest hierarchy within us humans, the individuated I, yeah, the highest level of selfhood, the higher ego, if you will, yeah, the I am in us, which is, sort of the person that has internalized their soul being, their energetic quality, their etheric being, and also their physical being in a conscious manner. That's basically our goal here. And a part of this sort of being human and having to deal with these two different realities, the physical and the spiritual reality, at the same time, yeah, is this task of building a bridge, of kind of finding a way to unify these two so that we can answer these questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose? What am I supposed to do, leave behind? Yeah, those are all like really deep, deep spiritual questions, and the mystery of life for as long as humans exist, really. Yeah, and so with spiritual science and this fourfold human, we get a little bit of a roadmap, a beginning roadmap, so we can all sort of perceive ourselves as physical being, obviously with our five senses and so forth, and we can all perceive ourselves as an ego being. Now, the ego, I often say that sort of jokingly, we get for free. So the ego is still mostly linked to our physiology, to our body mind, if you will. It provides us with survival instincts and with abilities, that help us to, on a very, very fundamental level, discern between pain and pleasure. The ego self, as I've noted in many of my other lectures, the True Self Talks or the Sacred Self Healing lectures, is not to be vilified here. It's not the enemy. We often talk about the ego in a psychological way, and we have a tendency to make it bad. All right, I suggest to look at the ego more as sort of a non-developed I. Yeah, it is the baby version, or the toddler version, the puppy version of our higher self. And so by not sort of going against our ego, but recognizing, okay, there are some aspects that come in through the ego that need to be trained, that need to be refined, that need to be worked with. Now, when it comes to the perception of ourselves as an etheric being, yeah, as a being that has sort of energetic qualities to it, I think it's in the past, at least for me as a spiritual teacher and guide and healer, the people that I would have categorized as energetically sensitives that sort of spontaneously awoke to, the existence of sort of energies within and around them. And this was a big part, sort of also of New Age and New Age's influx from the Eastern traditions, especially the Indian traditions, with like learning about chakras, mostly through yoga and so forth. The popularity of yoga has brought sort of this awareness of some of the fundamental spiritual tools in, but often lacking deeper understanding, and sometimes even to the degree of profaning them. But I don't want to be critical here. I just want you to understand sort of how this all sort of came into our modern Western society, and that is that we've been, Sean, you said this, your mom liked yoga, and she liked, some of the old Ayurvedic, Vedic healing traditions, yeah. These are all things that are coming into our society more and more now, as we are realizing that there is more to reality than just the physical, materium, if you will. So energetic understanding comes mostly through us, through, standing still and actually sort of ingesting what it is that we are perceiving, including what we're sensing in our body, what we're feeling in our emotions, and the words, the thought patterns that we're thinking. Yeah, so these are all still linked to this energetic quality that we have, and it is mostly sort of at night in our dream world or through vision quests that we get in contact with sort of the deep aspects of our astral body. And also, unfortunately, a lot of times when there is no training there, when there is no proper guidance there with the lower astral or the more scary aspects of the spirit world, yeah, which could be, through demons or, like nightmares and horrific things that we can sort of tap into if we don't have a proper roadmap, yeah, without knowing how to handle this. So in the last, I would say, 40 years, at this phenomenon of us awakening to the energetic quality of life and also to the astral quality of life, yeah, the spiritual quality of life, has mostly been dealt with on a psychological level. And psychology, guys, is not sufficient as a concept, as a tradition, or some call it science, but it's really more like an observational science. It's not proficient to help understanding, the things that people tap into really when they have these out-of-body experiences or, a deeper spiritual awakening experiences. So I really want you guys to become a little bit more discerning here when it comes to psychologists or psychiatrists talking about spirituality. This is a different science, guys. This is not sufficient. Psychology and psychiatry deals with the physiological aspects of that, and of course the observation of patterns and behaviors of people. So spiritual science is really, sort of the next level, yeah, where we can observe the psychological patterns, we can observe the physiological patterns, and we can observe our own thinking, obviously, and bring this together with our inner spiritual experience. But as you just heard in some of my commentary here, there can be issues. Okay, so if we're untrained in navigating these vast sort of unknown, unseen, yeah, super sensible worlds. All right. It's like tapping in the dark. Yeah. So there's got to be something in us that can help us, especially when, people like me and Steiner and so many others like me, priests, of any spiritual tradition, really remind you that this is an inner journey, that this is something that comes from within, that the light is in you, and that we gotta learn how to shine our lights. Okay, so if you take that picture, that imagery of sort of entering the spirit world, which is an unknown, which is dark to most of us, yeah, and needing sort of our own inner light, yeah, as sort of like, well, at the beginning it's maybe just a little flashlight, which then becomes a huge big spotlight, which eventually can become a huge sort of beacon of light, yeah, and even show some of these spirit worlds to others. I take this imagery and now connect sort of the essence of your sacred heart, the flame that is in your heart, yeah, this seeking, this wanting to understand, this wanting to belong. There's a tiny little flame I call the fireflies, yeah, in last episodes. Wanting to make this bigger so that it can guide you through the unknown, the sort of darkness, yeah, of these spirit worlds, of these etheric and astral worlds. Now, in the physical world, you can use your eyes, more or less. Yeah, but in the spiritual world, you need different kinds of eyes, and that these eyes are replaced through your heart, sometimes also called the etheric heart, and the flame, yeah, the light that is growing in there. And I mentioned a few issues that can come in through, for example, tragedy, trauma, confusion, irritation, pre-programming, also infestation, yeah, or exposure, where we are under the influence of, say, dark spiritual forces and not even aware of this. So there's many, many different reasons why our flashlight doesn't work right. Okay, and maybe it does work at times, but for the most part, we can't really reproduce it. Are you guys familiar with what I'm referring to? Yeah, where you sometimes sort of get these flickers or these tiny moments of input or guidance, but then sort of become unsure if you can trust it or dismiss it, or just because you really can't reproduce it, right? So the goal here, yeah, is for us to let our line shine brighter, but not just in a sort of unbridled way, just projecting the light onto everybody, yeah, and preaching love and light. Yeah, this is a different kind of a sort of problem that can also occur, that has, sort of infested New Age a little bit, this sort of unbridled, just shining the light and wanting to ascend and wanting to be illuminated. So really all I'm trying to say is that there's sort of a certain level of purification needed, yeah, that, is, needed for all of us, okay, just even due to normal human everyday life, yeah, through the distractions of our ADHD mind, social media, having to pay your bills, having to deal with neighbors, having to deal with the stress in traffic, or other stressors, yeah. Those are all aspects or factors, parameters that dim our light, yeah, that can sometimes even extinguish our light, yeah, to the point of desperation. But then there are things that can help us to increase our light, to help sort of this flame, yeah, become larger, become greater, become more kindled. And that is, something that I want to discuss here with you, namely how certain things can help us, to perhaps discover our inner light or to grow it. And you guys, unconsciously already shared a few ways, seeking for self-improvement, seeking for self-help, self-healing, seeking for just more clarity, seeking to understand yourself. Those, and most of us are not aware of it, are actually methods of purification, spiritual inquiry, actually sitting down and asking yourself these questions. Now, I may find it difficult to find answers, all right? Yeah, but even just sort of taking the time, allocating the time, perhaps even also allocating the space. Yeah, the space, like for example, noise-free space, where you're not distracted, or, a nature environment, or, a loving environment, with animals and family or loved ones. These are all things that help you, to purify yourself, as opposed to, these stressors and these parameters that I mentioned. So the willingness to do that, guys, in and of itself is already a step into purification. Of course, there are more elaborate ways, and we can discuss them as well as we go here with our series. But I really want you to understand that, purification does not require us to climb to the mountaintop and starve ourselves for 40 days. Or it can mean that, and some of us choose that. Some of us choose, physical forms, like fasting and pilgrimage and exhaustion, ascesis, as it was called in the Vedic times, to sort of let go and surrender all of our lower desires and these things that keep sort of distracting us from oops, I'm missing a slide here, that distracting us, these parameters that I talked about, from actually sort of going into this place where we can start feeling not just our physical body through breathing, but also tuning into our energetic quality, maybe through invocations, maybe through meditation, stillness, concentration, and our astral body through tuning into the deeper sort of spiritual feeling within us. And I'm going to try to help you with this here in a few moments, just like how I've done this in the previous episodes, through sharing a story with you, an allegorical story, and then to at the end, to going through an invocation with you that can help you sort of to enter the space of purifying yourself, letting go, surrendering. You guys all know what surrendering and what letting go means. At least you've heard it and have a feeling of what it means. But what it truly means, not just in the Taoist way, the Buddhic way, or the psychological way, is actually to loosen all the binds that we have, to realize what it is that holds us in its bind, like belief systems, unconscious beliefs, emotional attachments, lower desires, addictions, but also, things that we think we have to be. These all belong to the process of purification, to let go of all of that you thought you needed to be, you were told that you have to be, maybe that you want it to be, or that you think you're going to have to strive to. I can tell you out of my own experience that everything that I do today, I did not want to do. This was not how I imagined myself, still sort of as an ego self, as a young ego self. I never wanted to have children. Oh my God, I never wanted to work with children. I didn't want to work with humans. I wanted to be in a lab. I wanted to be a researcher. I never wanted to work with anything alternative healing or anything like that. Bit by bit, decade after decade, I had to learn to let all these things go, to arrive to a place where I could start feeling my inner light. And then there's obviously also another period where we have to form courage, where we have to form the confidence to learn to trust in it and to actually start embodying it. So the Jona Bryndis that you see here today has a long, long journey of purification behind her. And I know many of you as well. So what is actually being revived when we, start sort of peeling off these different layers from us? From a spiritual science perspective, why purification is so needed is because it increases our capacity to receive light. It's like I mentioned earlier, maybe a good way to picture it is like a vessel inside of you. Your sacred heart with the sacred flame in it that is supposed to hold this light. And purification is needed to increase the capacity. We all have the potential for it. But it might just be a tiny little flame. And for it to actually shine the light into darkness, we need to have a sort of a bigger flashlight, right? So we need to sort of gradually increase our capacity. And with that comes something that many of you sort of intuitively connect with spirituality, and that has to do with the divine feminine spirit in us all. In us all, please remember this, has nothing to do with genders. We all consist of this masculine and feminine, this polarity within ourselves. The masculine and feminine energy that are sort of linked, to the masculine spirit of divinity and the feminine spirit of divinity. And in many other workshops, we talk about sort of the different properties, the different sort of nature that these aspects of the Holy Spirit have. But when it comes to actually working on opening our heart and increasing the capacity for this sort of spiritual flame, the spiritual light in us to shine brighter, it's really the divine feminine qualities, the qualities of receiving, the qualities of nurturing, the qualities of, sort of tending, to the fertile ground, that connect us with this aspect of purification. There's a reason why, for example, in Greek mythology, the protectors of the horse, those were all females, Hestia being sort of the representation of that goddess in Greek mythology. You'll find, these representations in all different traditions. Sort of this divine feminine quality, that not only prepares the ground, but also nurtures the ground and takes good care of it. And weeds, takes away, clears out what takes away the nutrients, what takes away the light. And thus balances sort of this Christ impulse here. I'm going to leave this here with a sticky note for our next episode. I want to discuss this with you a little deeper, but why I call it the Christ impulse or spiritual science, has to do with the point that it is inside of you. Yeah, this Christ light. You've probably heard this a lot. And this has to do with the history of all our spiritual traditions. Yeah, so if you have a different spiritual tradition, don't be afraid to use the word Christ light, because that's not necessarily defining a church or a tradition. It is a standing word in spiritual science. Yeah. And so it is the feminine quality, the divine feminine quality that is needed to balance that within us. Yeah, so the Christ impulse basically as the seeker in us, yeah, that goes out and wants to find sort of all the answers, that wants to connect with the knowledge of the spirit worlds. It needs to be balanced, it needs to be tamed, it needs to have a home, a safe, sacred place, so that it does not get led astray by the dark forces that we will also address in future episodes, that sort of lead our knowledge to places where it gets even darker. So going a little deeper here into the divine feminine spirit, which is throughout our societies also known as the Sophia. And you've heard me talk about this lately quite a bit, the Isis or the world soul, Gaia, a lot of times. Yeah, so we have a lot of sort of images, archetypal images that we think of, that we connect with. Mary, of course, also when we think of the divine spirit. But if we actually dive into our inner experience, we can all learn to feel this within ourselves without these these representative or these archetypes, if they collide with our belief system. So there's a little bit of a purification needed as well, because if we sort of let go of some of these, we can be a little bit more free spiritually, yeah, to investigate, to feel into the quality of them. But we can also work with them, and this is my approach. I am interested, I am curious. What does the Isis, what does the Sophia, yeah, what does the Maria, why are they used as these archetypes for the divine spirit? And we'll do this together here as we keep going. But really, when we feel into it for ourselves, like we do here at transCODES, where we have all different kinds of courses and programs, where we train this, yeah, to pull, our mind out of this sort of mental, physical machine world into our inner spiritual world. And there you can find something like the divine spirit that does not come with the face necessarily, that is just like a really deep inner feeling of lovingness and belongingness and feeling safe. Yeah, so I'd rather have you focus on the feeling of it than sort of the visuals, because can often also be misleading. And the reawakening of that, the revival of that, is indicating the need for us to return to that, yeah, and to go into our heart and align this with our soul. Yeah, this is part of the purification process. It's like preparing our vessel for even receiving sort of the spiritual wisdom. Yeah, like having a large enough vessel, a big enough flashlight. Yeah, and we do this here at the end of July, at the end of St. John's Tide and the Feast of Mary Magdalene in the Catholic traditions. Yeah, to remember why in our Western society, Western Christian society, yeah, we are tuning into the St. John's, John the Baptist, and the Mary Magdalene. And this is very, very interesting. If you take away the fact that they are mentioned in the Bible, if you just use them as archetypes and you look at the polarity that these two figures bring into our sort of spiritual understanding, you'll see that John the Baptist, he was the one that sort of announced Jesus's birth and Jesus's, the transfiguration into the Christ. He was the one that baptized the Christ. So this just for sort of historical or remembrance. So just so you know where this comes from, you can look at it as historical. You can look at it as myth. I'm using these archetypes here as sort of the most recent mythology that we are all connect with. And as the Baptist, he was the one that led on purification, and he always talked about the water and the fire and the need for, sort of to really have the will to do this and to walk, to use the water also with a slightly feminine quality, for purification, but also to use the fire, the will, to actually this flame, to be prepared. And Mary Magdalene, if you recall, at least in the Bible and the New Testament, she was the fallen woman that had sort of witnessed Jesus, or the Christ in Jesus, as something that healed her. Yeah, and she's associated with oil and tears. Yeah, with sort of this element of taking care and releasing and dissolving and sort of allowing things to come from you. Yeah, oil in many ancient traditions, if not all, is used as purification medium. Yeah, but also here as this fallen woman, the symbol for love and inner sight. Yeah, and this polarity, this is something that comes in when we purify, because when we want to let go of our lower desires, our illusions and delusions of the ego or the material world, then we have to kind of, be willing to go through a baptism of thought, feeling, and will. And I'm telling you something, we do this at transCODES every day and in the Sacred Self-Healing community, which is free, by the way, every day. And that is, become aware of our thought, become aware of our feeling, and of our willingness to follow through. That is then ultimately what leads to our moral purification, and integrity, as we so easily use these words. But moral purification and integrity, guys, and especially inner truthfulness, is not an easy task. Yeah. But what that does, and this is sort of to help you to conclude your understanding of purification, is that it makes you transparent to spirit. Yeah. And in that, it sort of kindles your flame. It kindles, it ignites your light. Yeah, for the spirit world to see. So it's not just a one way. It's not just that you need a flashlight to kind of know where you're going. You also need to be seen, by the spirit world, so that there is a communication, a communion that can take place. And in spiritual science is also the preparing for the heart of the etheric Christ, which we will also get into in a later episode. So the revival of the divine feminine spirit, these qualities that I just discussed with you, and the elements, sort of purification, are seen as our soul task now in this stage of collective soul development. Yeah, it's a collective soul task. And it has nothing to do with the cultural rebellion or equality of the, men and women or transgender or anything like that. There's a spiritual necessity for us to form our consciousness soul, to revive this moral imagination, integrity, and sacred perception. And this entails, this returning of the Sophia, of the wisdom, of the earth, the Gaia Sophia, the wisdom of the cosmos. And also why, the Christ light is called Christ light, the Christ mystery. We're not going to be able to answer this here today, but we will. And ultimately, for the task of completing the Trinity within, the Spirit, the soul, and the self. Right now, most of us work with the Trinity of the Holy Father, the Holy Son, and the Holy Spirit. As we are developing our consciousness soul, as we are individuating our soul self, we are beginning to complete this Trinity within, as the union of the masculine and feminine spirit, as the union with our soul and ourself. Basically, in technical terms, the uniting of our etheric and astral under our higher self. I know that there's a lot of terms here and a lot of things that are quite complex in nature, and like I said in the beginning, I can only give you a little bit of an introduction. Can you follow me so far? Do you have a good feeling for what sort of purification means and why this is associated with this divine feminine spirit? Okay. So the last element here that I wanted to bring in, and this is very complex, I know, but I promise you it's all going to sort of come together when I read you the story. The understanding of Holy Communion and what that actually is. So me personally, I did not grow up in Christian church. And when I go to a Catholic church or even, Protestant church or whatever, it still is somewhat of a resistance in me. I had to walk forward and, drink the wine or the grape juice and, but we have to understand this. Okay? So I'm working on this with myself because it is not supposed to really be a literal act of, here, this is my body, here, this is my blood. But it is a symbolic inner act, and it is the inner act of transformation, transforming ourselves sort of through all these methods of purification and internalization. So a symbolic act of wanting to commune with the spiritual world, wanting to commune, nourishing this two-way aspect. We talked a little bit about this in episode 2, where we did an invocation in the smoke ceremony, if you remember, sort of also giving back. It is a form of nourishing, a form of cultivating and, like not just keeping it clean, but also, becoming a good sort of space, sacred space for us to, be with our own inner spirit world. And I would strongly suggest that no matter, again, what spiritual tradition you lean to, that you create something like a spiritual sacred space in your home, maybe in your garden or whatever. Is it like a little altar or a little place where you symbolically enter this holy communion with the spirit world? And you don't really need to do the bread and the wine or whatever other substances. And in fact, we don't really need those substances anymore here in today's sort of stage of soul development. We just need to recognize that we are, you know, in our physical, we have already sort of received this capacity to connect with the spirit world. Yeah, our body basically is the flame. It's just still tiny because we're not fully aware of it yet, and we haven't really worked it through. And our blood, yeah, already contains, yeah, these purified soul aspects that we need to cultivate. And we already have sort of the feminine soul, yeah, the divine feminine spirit in form of the capacity to to gain spiritual wisdom in us, yeah, like the chalice. There's also here sort of the hint at the Grail legend, what that actually is. And we already have the ability to enter this sort of transformative process, yeah, of receiving this light and also shining our light. So I want you guys to understand Holy Communion in no way sort of contradicting to your spiritual tradition. I want you to grow this larger and to see yourself sort of as the body, as the blood that does, this connection, this communion with the spirit world, due to the fact that you are aware and that you are wanting, that you are seeking this spiritual wisdom, this sort of grail within you, that you are sort of really wanting to grow this within you. Here, just another hint, yeah, the understanding the Holy Grail myth as sort of it's kind of like a direction manual as the future of human soul development. And maybe one day we're going to read some of the Holy Grail stories together and dive a little bit deeper into the mythology of Parsifal. I would love to do that with you guys. But here I just want to give you a little bit of a sort of better sort of connection with this, because I mean again, the Holy Grail is also stems out of the Western, the Christian tradition, but it is also something that many of us can tune into, even if we're not necessarily connected to Christianity. Yeah, and that is because the Grail is really this vessel, this sort of sacred heart container that I mentioned to you, that is linked to the feminine spirit. It is that which Parsifal and so many others went out to seek, at first believing that it was something physical, something material, like a worldly treasure that they had to find, only to find out that this is actually a heavenly treasure. It is a spiritual treasure that lives within ourselves. But before sort of being able to connect with this within ourselves, there's sort of a preparation needed, and that is the purification of our astral body. It requires from us to let go of our attachments, of our ego stuff, if you will, and have a sort of beginning understanding of what it means to be an individualized soul self. Yeah, I often call this, this first sort of prerequisite to understand yourself as a soul that has a body and not a body with a soul. Yeah, so this individuated soul self, yeah, is basically where it happens. But it is the Holy Grail, this vessel, this container in your sacred heart, and the flame in there that actually makes you become able to hold this, to hold and to discern this wisdom. So the Christ Sophia reunion in spiritual science is sort of the future of our human soul development, the next stage, if you will. Yeah, how are you guys doing? I promise I I'm not going to add any more terms or anything here. At this point, I just want to read a little allegorical story to you that helps you to maybe connect with all of what has been said on a more visual or more feeling level. Are you guys ready for sort of tuning into my personal understanding, yeah, of inner purification and the rebirth of this wisdom, that's the Holy Grail in us, called The Garden and the Flame by Jona Bryndis. There was once a forgotten garden at the center of the world, not visible for the outer eye, but known to every soul that ever longed for something sacred and true. Children knew this place. They came to visit often, chasing after butterflies and walking among the mystical creatures they revered. The natural beauty of the good and the beautiful allowed the kids to experience the awe of what it means to be human. But when getting older, only a few remember it exists. And so fewer and fewer of us still dare to enter this secret garden, this forgotten garden. For the entrance could only be found through an act of inner truthfulness. At the edge of the world lived a weary seeker, burdened by confusion, loneliness, and longing, and with a silent ache of a life lived outwardly. Every night they would dream of a light, unreachable yet persistent, like a star shining from within their own chest, but they did not know how to reach it. One night, the seeker heard a whisper. Before the flame can be found, the vessel must be made ready. Purify the soul. Confused, the seeker wandered far into the inner wilderness of himself, overwhelmed by the dangers and wonders of the ego world. They often got distracted and stuck in what others told them to go after. But one day, right when the seeker was willing to let go of their quest, they met a mysterious woman clothed in deep blue and woven gold. Her name was Sophia, and her presence brought a sudden stillness to everything. You seek the flame, she said, but it cannot be held in what is still clouded by fear, resentment, or falsehood. The flame cannot light up in a soul that is cluttered, restless, or closed. It must begin the work of cleansing and purification. And the seeker listened, still unsure what to cleanse. After what felt like a lifetime of struggle, there didn't seem much left to let go of. But with a sudden courage in his heart, the seeker began the long, patient journey. They returned to memories long buried, tilling the hardened soil of pain and shame. They wept tears that washed away pride and numbness, cleansing their inner waters. They fasted from noise, distraction, and judgment, clearing space for something more real. They offered up their fixed ideas, their defenses, and their false self-images. stripping the soul bare. Each act of surrender was difficult, like peeling away layers of bark to find the tender green beneath. But in each honest moment, the garden responded. A new shoot emerged, the sky brightened. As the seeker grew in humility and clarity, they noticed a small flower blooming in the center of the garden, its shape like a chalice, open yet strong. Within its center, a little flame danced, soft, pure, and alive. Sophia reappeared, her eyes glistening with quiet joy. "You have made yourself ready," she said. "The flame is not given from without. It arises from within, and the soul has become clear enough to reflect its light." In that moment, they understood. Purification is not punishment. It is the sacred preparation for revelation and illumination. The soul is the garden. Wisdom is the gardener. The flame is what awakens when the heart is made ready. And so the seeker became one who tends the gardens, not outwardly, but within, carrying the knowledge that spiritual illumination comes not through striving, but through the deep courage to purify, to let go, and to become transparent to spirit. The flame does not come where the soul clings, Sophia whispered. It descends when the soul becomes the vessel. So this is it, guys. This is really what this purification is all about. Becoming the gardener, the steward, the caretaker of the flame. By letting go all the things that confuse us, that scare us, that bring darkness into our lives, that make us angry, that divide us, that make us see only the ugly in the world, so that we can see the good and the true and the beautiful again. So the invitation here is really to seeing purification as an inner work of preparation. Yeah. Where am I being called to purify? Yeah. What do I need to let go of? What within me is already ready to receive? And what is not quite yet? And how am I receiving the divine feminine spirit? Do I still have resentments? Do I think feminine is weak? Do I think that being feminine means to be over emotional and irrational? Do I degrade the feminine maybe unconsciously? If I am a woman, do I misuse or neglect or desanctify my feminine body? If I'm a man, am I feeling resentment or disgust, or am I degrading the feminine in me? Yeah, those are all questions that we can ask ourselves, how we nourish this divine feminine quality, this divine feminine spirit in us. If we want the Sophia, if we want the feminine spirit to talk, to speak through us, we need to give it a place. We need to give it a vessel. Yeah, and many of you are perhaps familiar with the Gaia Sophia, and this is really the key for many of us intuitively anyway, yeah, to invite nature, to connect with nature's cycles and rhythms, the cosmos. Yeah, that's the Gaia Sophia. That's the wisdom in the cosmos that we can connect with through the living spirit of our planet. Yeah, this is probably the easiest and maybe also the hardest in times like this, where we are distancing ourselves more and more from this organic wisdom, yeah, toward inorganic, artificial wisdom. We can't really talk about wisdom anymore then when it's artificial, but your attraction, your longing to nature is a wonderful inner guidance to follow. Yeah, there's a lot of that wisdom that you can find in nature. And I think it was Kira earlier who said that when you start this journey, you get really from one thing to the next. And once you start connecting with nature, you start to connecting with something else, and it inspires you, to maybe dive more into, the animals or the animal spirits or herbs or mushrooms or nutrients, diet, your own body. All this is sort of connected with one another, and it is more often than not, yeah, the divine feminine spirit in you that connects it all. The divine masculine spirit in you is more sort of the directed seeker, yeah, the wanting to know all details and wanting to know more and more and more, yeah, for the sake of gaining knowledge. And just the feminine spirit is the one that initiates sort of the gaining wisdom. Any questions here so far? As I am about to close our session here with an invocation that you can, use yourself. I'm going to send it with the recording. Any questions to any of the material that was introduced to you here? All right, then let's go. I'm going to stop. I suggest that if you want to sort of use this as a bit of a ceremony for yourself to connect with the Gaia Sophia, to connect with the St. John's imagination would be the equivalent here in spiritual science. If you want to connect with, this purification aspect of your soul, then I suggest that you create a little bit of a ritual, a little bit of a sacred space. Yeah, maybe with a candle. Get a red candle. A red candle stands for the purified feminine spirit. Yeah, maybe a little bit of water. Yeah, maybe a little bit of a stone or a crystal, bringing in sort of that earth element. Yeah, and begin your ritual with grounding, centering, and self-clearing. As I introduce this to you, you close your eyes, you take a deep breath, direct your breath into your feet, into the soles of your feet. Try to focus on feeling the ground pushing against the soles of your feet, yeah, and announcing to yourself that you are present. Yeah, so it's really about that threshold where your feet and the earth meet. It's about that space. And now take another deep breath. Try to pull in all these energies from the ground into your center. Take another deep breath where you pull in sort of all the energies above your head into your heart. Try to do this again and do both simultaneously if you can. Okay, so, and then breathe out, picturing your breath going sideways, sideways, sideways. One more time. In, out. And now rub your hands as fast as you can. Okay, and use this energy, this heat that you create in the palm of your hands to clear your eyes, to wipe the fog from your eyes, and to clear your head from all these sort of obsessive thinking thoughts and thought patterns. We stand at the turning point of light when the sun shines the highest and the spirit calls for clarity. Through fire and stillness, we purify our thoughts. Through heart and water, we cleanse our feelings. And through earth and will, we renew our deeds. May this sacred hour open the path to inner truth and spiritual light. And here comes the invocation for the cosmic spirit. You can see this as an energy alignment. In the heights is weaving the spirit of the world. In the depths is surging the will that purifies and forms. Let the radiant spirit shine in us, burning away all that is false. Let the will of the world awaken within the soul, a flame of purpose, a stream of clarity, a light that redeems. The radiant heights, in radiant heights, let thinking be purified, in surging depths, let willing be consecrated. In the sacred center, let feeling be illuminated. So may the soul stand clear and upright, a chalice of light, a vessel of truth between heaven and earth. Let all that is untrue to be burned away. Let shadows to be illuminated, and let the Spirit speak through silence. Through the gate of the senses, may I receive the wisdom of Spirit. Through the fire of the heart, may I unite with the living earth. I release what no longer serves. I remember who I truly am. I stand purified in the light of the world. Spirit in the heights, earth in the depths, heart in the center. Burn bright within me, cleanse me, renew me, that I may walk in clarity, speak in truth, and serve in love. Yeah. So let's the spirit above, the earth below, and the heart and the center. That is you. Let that shine. Connect with it. You can meditate. You can find a beautiful spot in nature where you do this. You can use this as a little prayer before falling asleep. But all serves nothing but asking for the Spirit to guide your path, for the soul to receive the light, and for the self to fully awaken in truth so that this can become your own holy communion with your own soul and the entire spirit world that is behind that. With that, I would like to close. I'd like to thank you guys all for coming here live, for watching the YouTube video, for sharing especially. Please share your comments in the commentary down below and maybe answer those questions or try to answer those questions that I asked earlier, those purification questions. Our next episode will be about, yes, the battle for your etheric. How can we prepare? How can we get ready for, well, sustaining ourselves in this spiritual world with our light still being a tiny little flashlight? So there are some dangers in that I mentioned earlier that we have to prepare for, we have to work sort of our spiritual understanding, not just our spiritual flashlight. Okay, we also need to know what it is that we're seeing there so that we can discern it. So I'm looking forward to episode 4. And thank you so much for coming, everyone. Bye-bye.